Hello, and welcome back to Axonius Adapt 25, the inaugural Axonius event. We're really excited to be here from Dallas, Texas at Gillies. Really, as we were just talking about with our guest, who's going to be on in a second here, a concert hall that is like really famous for a lot of really great artists and stuff, a really cool little venue, and I'm excited. I got Jackie here, who's our newest analyst in the security vertical. We're going to get to geek out on this because we're joined by Erik Nost, who's the senior analyst for security and risk at Forrester. So this is just analysts here geeking out on what we've heard and what we're hearing around the water cooler or coffee venue.
White paper cooler.
The white paper cooler or the little dummies guides that are on every table here. So, welcome on board, Erik.
Awesome, yeah, happy to be here.
And your first time on theCUBE, hopefully not the last, so we always enjoy having other perspectives on here, and so thanks for coming on. I think just to give us a high level view, kind of break down where you see Axonius and the industry as a whole kind of fitting in, and what's going on, and why this is a really important time for security, for asset management, and understanding the security over all of that.
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing is a shift from reactive to proactive security. I think there's the recognition that, hey, we've been reacting to things like 0 days, and we're reacting to whatever the celebrity vulnerabilities of the week all the time. It really makes it difficult for us to have good proactive strategies. But to get there, you have to understand like what you're dealing with, what your prioritization should be, like what's the context that kind of feeds into that, and then ultimately get towards what Dean talked about earlier, like actionability and remediating these weaknesses that have been prioritized.
Yeah, I think to me that is one of it, and Jackie, I mean, you see it also, you're talking to CISOs, there's a lot of them here. I mean, this event is like brain power central from a security perspective, so what are you seeing as well? I mean, Dean talking about actionability and getting to actionability as well.
Yeah, I think one of the first papers I wrote as a security analyst was security as a data problem, and I think we started in a place where we didn't have enough data, we didn't have enough visibility, we kind of went to bring your own device and remote work overnight without a huge amount of planning for most enterprises. And now we're at a place where we have a lot of visibility, we have a lot of data, and now we're losing things because there's so much data, and there's so much that we can see that, everything from alert fatigue to, just being able to bury attacks in these really, really noisy logs that attackers know we're all kind of struggling with. So I think taking that next step to, okay, we couldn't see everything, now we can see everything. Now what are the things that we're seeing that are the most important? Because realistically, you're never going to patch everything, you're never going to remediate everything, so I think moving to a place where we can make intelligent decisions about where we spend our time and resources fixing things is where we need to be going. So it's great to hear more focus on that. I'm sure you find the same thing, that you hear from more CISOs that they have too much data than not enough.
Yeah, absolutely. The problem's kind of shifted. I think like 2-3 years ago, there was like, you need visibility to be able to do whatever it is you need to do. But now we've bought all these point products, we have all these different things giving us different risk scores, giving us different kinds of highlights that might be kind of distracting towards what the actual proactive picture is and what really matters to the business. So yeah, I agree, it's too much visibility at this point.
Yeah. So where do you see and what's differentiating kind of the different companies that are in this landscape? Because you've got to cover it all, so what are you seeing as differentiation?
Yeah, so the way I think about it is platform, right? So platform is like kind of the name of the game in the security industry. Everything's trying to be a platform. But when I think about a proactive security platform, I go back to how much visibility is this platform providing you, and how far along this life cycle is it leading you to actually be proactive? Because again, if you have the visibility, so what? You need to have a good prioritization strategy so that you can actually fix stuff. That's the thing, is like we need to fix the things that we've been talking about fixing for so long if we're actually going to improve our posture. So that's one thing I see, like a proactive platform, but every security company in the industry is also...
Everybody's a platform.
Everybody's a platform, but you kind of see like reactive platforms out there, so like your classic SecOps companies that are trying to marry their insights from SecOps into proactive as well. Which has like some interesting synergy when you start to kind of look at that.
Yeah, I think that to me is the big thing when I came here, and I come from the observability world and from the DevOps world, and I start to look at this and people building signals into everything, plus all of the APIs and the SaaS and all of these different things. I think the one thing I took away from the earlier comments that Dean had from the stage was the breadth of adapters that they have, and also some of the numbers that they put up on there, that 300% growth in SaaS applications. To me, that makes total sense, because they want to spend their money on building applications that are actually positive in revenue for that organization. But when they're doing that, now they're using really just their core assets, their core intellectual property. What are you seeing in this market, and kind of where Axonius is playing, that really it's how people can get from being reactive to proactive to being actionable in that way? What are you seeing in that movement and that journey towards actionability?
Yeah, I think it's a slow movement. I think people are initially kind of catching on to, hey, I have all these insights, I'm starting to build a better prioritization strategy, whether that's using like exploit prediction scoring system, or some of the features you see like an attack path mapping that exists now, to start to kind of look at how identities and CVEs and externally facing assets can all chain to have like an actual objective achieved by an attacker. But again, to get there needs to be an appetite to automate, and that's really what I see folks have a struggle with, is letting go of the control and keeping humans in the loop. You need to be able to actually make changes on systems, configuration changes, have some more automation around patch management, which I think that's going to be the big the challenge that CISOs and security leaders are going to have, as they try and complete this life cycle of proactive.
Yeah. One of the things I'm really hopeful for, and I want to commend us because we made it halfway through this interview without saying AI. I'm going to bring it up though. So when we talk about automation, it's kind of like, I go back to like automating cars, right? And so we've been trying to automate cars for 15 years, and it turns out that humans do some really crazy, unpredictable, out of the scope things when they drive and walk and bike that make it really hard to automate cars. The SOC is not entirely different, right? I've never met two companies that have the same tech stack or the same organization in security. So as we start to look to automate this, do you think we're finally going to start to adhere to one of the 845 standards that exist for logging? Because there are all of these, OCSF was going to be the schema that was going to unite them all. We really can't automate things that aren't consistent. So do you think this kind of desire to automate and maybe the economic windfall behind it will bring us closer to adhering to some common set of standards?
Yeah, it's a great question. I haven't thought of that before, but to get to automation, I would agree that you need to have a standard set of standards, or an expected set of standards that you would need to adhere to. We were talking earlier about just like, first you need to be on UTC, right? Like across the globe,
but my
right?
firewall's in Chicago Central Time.
Yeah. So like, start there, maybe. But I think that's part of it, so getting to those standards, absolutely, but I think there's something kind of deeper outside of that that's like just emotional, that's like deals with human emotions and just like fear of letting go and all the things that can potentially go wrong. Maybe the standards will help kind of like alleviate that.
Yeah.
But and it could eventually maybe drive what the standard ultimately is.
Yeah, what are you seeing as some of the largest, I guess you could say, barriers or challenges that organizations are having to get to that automation, to get to that visibility?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's fear that when you're going to automate something, that it's going to break something. Tons of examples over the past year about what can happen if you automate things and automate changes, automate updates to maybe an agent on a.
having to sit in the Delta Sky Club for 3 hours, I can tell you that.
I got stuck in Chicago.
That was
North Carolina. Yeah.
But I mean, to your point, I mean, the automation, yeah. But go ahead.
But we've had all these processes for so long in patch management and change management and ITIL, right? Yeah. So it's just like the old school ITIL kind of mentality of logging all these changes, testing everything. But this is where, now I'm going to mention AI, where I think maybe there's opportunity to get there, right? Because if you start to look at not generative AI, but agentic AI and
machine learning. Let's just call it machine learning, because there's so much of machine learning that's not AI that actually works in security. Yes. I say, coming from a data scientist in security, like, we don't need large language models for syslog.
No, we don't. But what is interesting is if we can leverage those to start to learn, to start to test these things and start to generate expected behaviors and expected outcomes, and what the security leaders are so hesitant to automate and have deeper actionability and automated remediation and so on, using AI to test these things, to generate text around what they can expect if they were to automate these things and so on. So I think that's where there is opportunity eventually.
Yeah, I mean, I see it as being able to do a lot of the documentation portion of it as well. Like, hey, I want to, not only you see these things, I see these alerts come in, help me put that into a sensible place that I can, give to a CEO, a CIO that, maybe doesn't know what bucket 2 S3 hashtag,
or code annotation
is. Yes.
I am admittedly a terrible developer to work with, because I don't annotate my Python code, because I'm like, I know what it does, why do you need to know what it does?
Yeah,
so I would love a co-pilot that just sat with me and explained to other people what I was doing.
To explain to people how vulnerable the code is, that you're right?
Well, not just how vulnerable it is, so I learned that the hard way, because my CEO was a former Mandiant guy, so when I handed him my first model, he was like, you shouldn't have these 800 things hard-coded in here, actually.
But I think that to me seems like where Axonius and Dean was just on, and we were talking through about their use of AI under the hood. I gave him actually props and didn't mention AI once in his keynote, which I was like, that takes a lot of restraint, because there's a lot of AI, traditional, what I'll call traditional AI or ML under the hood that's happening. How do you see the next 3 to 5 years playing out? Because they've announced their exposures and their identity, they're building out the platform and really covering more of these areas. How do you see the entire landscape? Is it going that direction where you're going to get a lot of these growing up platforms that are really covering a bigger part of the landscape? Or is it, hey, we're still going to have a lot of these connectors that we have to build by hand and do these integrations into these multiple platforms or multiple data silos?
I think you'll see both. And you already see it happening in the industry. So if you're a security company that's like really good at cloud, you specialize in cloud, that's what you start to see them make acquisitions or start to build out products that might be better at endpoint or better at identity or some of these other things. So you can kind of track like the acquisitions that have occurred and start to see, well, some companies have their strong suits, and then they're going to either build or buy or integrate. Yes. So I think it comes down to build, buy, or integrate. And I think the trend that we're going to continue to see is integration, because that's going to be a lot easier.
As analysts, I know we make our careers on creating new acronyms, so I just want to trademark POR right now, which will be Platform Orchestration Analysis and Response, because that's where we're going to end up, right? Everybody's going to become a platform, and then to your point, every platform is going to be specializing in different things, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, we need a platform for our platforms, and so it goes.
So I agree, but I thought it was interesting where Dean was like, hey, we kind of, came up with Chasm back in the day. He has the Google sheet, Google search, saved, which is pretty funny. Now that he's saying that they've crossed the chasm That came to me while I was sitting there watching.
Pretty good.
Yes,
pretty good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
He's crossed the chasm and moving towards, that, actionability. How do you see the future of this, asset intelligence and cybersecurity coming together over time? How do you see this going into the future, where they play and what they've been good at for the last 8 years?
Yeah, so when you get into like visibility, right, I think about a couple different ways. There's breadth and depth, because it's like you want to know all the assets and you want to know what types of endpoints, identities might have access to, or what infrastructure is connected to the internet, and all these other things, and that takes a wide view around different types of asset types, from network to data to devices and so on. But there's also depth. There's also like understanding why this asset exists, who owns it, who's responsible for it, who's supposed to be doing patching or configurations on it.
How it's configured.
Yeah, how it's configured,
Or
so
not.
what's the state of that device right now. And I think one of the biggest challenges in that is the business value that asset has. So it's very difficult still, it's still pretty subjective to say, hey, this device is risky, or this cloud instance is risky because A, B, and C with these vulnerabilities, but what is it actually doing for our business, and what is the disruption that we're going to have for if it's owned for whatever reason?
Yeah.
Tying risk to enterprise value is definitely something I've talked about a lot since I rejoined the analyst ranks, and I think it's something that a lot of security teams struggle with, because a lot of times we're talking about conceptual risk or risk avoided versus sales closed and revenue in. So I hope that we continue to focus on that and getting better about talking about the dollars and cents behind the risk that we're saving our companies, not just making you check an extra box before you sign into AWS.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great place for us to leave off. Thanks, Erik, for coming on.
Absolutely.
First time, not last time. Glad to have you on here, and glad Axonius could bring you by. So thanks for joining us.
Awesome, my pleasure. Yeah, thank you.
And thank you guys for watching this Axonius Adapt 25, live from Dallas. We'll be back with more, and we're going to keep digging in on these themes and getting you the story. From here, live on theCUBE, we're the leader in tech analysis and news. Stay tuned.